Welcome to Black in a Box, the world is told by black faces in white spaces. And this week in new spaces. Alana, you good?
Yeah, I am. I'm PMSing, to be honest, so slightly emotional.
Anything could happen today.
Yeah.
I've got a few spots that might be in like 4K because we're recording, but we move. So
I can't wait to agree with everything you say today.
thank you. Yeah, be warned.
I respect you for keeping it real, though. You kept it real there. You could have just, bottled that up. It's an open space.
Gotta keep it
Yeah.
real. It's also the first day of Sagittarius season, so gotta keep it real.
What does that mean?
Don't worry, we'll go through it later.
Yeah. I'm sure Scully will text in, let us know what Sag season is really about. Dom?
Yeah, man, all good. All good. I'm happy. I'm alive. I'm healthy. What else can I say? I'm good.
Nice.
Crispy.
Thank you.
You got any more travelling lined up?
You know what? I'm bowing out for the year. I'm bowing out.
You've had a good run.
9 trips.
You've had a good run.
It's egregious behaviour. It's too many. And 3 big trips in the last 2 months I've had to duck out. But it's been a wonderful ride. Carbon footprint is doing a madness right now, though. So we are out until... We'll give it until spring. We'll be back in spring.
Yeah. We'll be back. COP23. Jello! How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Just busy days, go leave the house in darkness, return in darkness. Sagittarius season, whatever that means. Feeling good.
Feeling good. Looking good. There was a rugby return, the streets are saying.
Streets is right. Streets is saying that there's a new fly half doing the business.
A new old fly half. Let's not get it twisted. But, mate, good to see you back out there on your own terms.
Yeah, definitely. That's it. That's all it was about, really. I can retire now.
Are you wearing a silk shirt?
No, I'm wearing my jacket indoors because I like to feel like a doorman in this jacket.
You do look like you could be one.
Yeah, guarding the bookshelf. Knowledge is power. He knows it.
Do I look like I'm in a cave in Tora Bora? Sorry, Dan.
I think it was Tora Bora, actually. So, I'm actually going to boot this up before we get into anything too deep by saying I am fuming. So, my niece, Chizomo, I tell people this and people do not believe me, right? I think you two met her at Carnival this year. She had her first Carnival at 8, absolutely loved it. And it's weird because the Carnival, I never really associate Carnival with children. And then I went, I was like, imagine how sick that would be if you were a kid to actually go. When people usually say family day, it's usually the day you don't have to worry about getting in beef. But it actually is a family day, and you actually saw that for the first time up close, and that's where you first met her. Anyway, Chizzy, she's been on BBC Radio about nearly, must be 20-something times now. She first did Sunrise Selector. Nadia J, shout out Nadia J. You can come on our show when you invite me on your show and stop inviting my little niece who's 8. They all had to get child protection training so she could go on.
Yeah.
She chose 3 songs. Madness. Honestly, she comes up with these songs herself and no one believes her. She was on again today. She was on with Munya.
That's so dope.
Munya Chihuahua. What is going on?
Your niece is going clear.
Exactly. She's on there. She's speaking Zimbabwean to him. He doesn't know Zimbabwean. And he showed him up live on air. Love that.
No.
So I'm on beef. She's into his DMs. They're gonna make spoiler alert. Just saying there might be a song. I'm just saying there might be a song. Could be a collab.
We've got a new host coming as well by the looks of it.
Bro, we're gonna premiere that on our TikTok channel. Do not worry.
I was on radio once.
Really?
Choice FM. Back in the day.
Oh wow.
Call in. Spoke to Lloyd Banks. Won his album.
Not
signed.
G-Unit Lloyd Banks.
G-Unit Lloyd Banks. I had to say what the number 10 song on his album was, and I won a for more. Me and Lloyd Banks bench and batty, mate. Honestly, it was wicked.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, I'll keep that one in the tuck.
Honestly. Well, there you go. So, Chizzy, Munya, we're going to bring you on soon. But on my air, I want to talk about something, I guess, related. We're talking about comedians this episode, and they both come to the fore for different reasons. I think the way I look at it is, people often question, like, what is the role of a comic? And we have all these lofty goals. People say, oh, this is supposed to speak truth to power. You know, they're supposed to be comics. They want to just stick to their jokes. And I once heard someone say, Jon Stewart, using jester's privilege to say something profound, was the worst thing to happen to US late night TV, because it then gave a seriousness to an entire generation of sort of presenter comics when they simply do not deserve it. And I was sort of inclined to agree. And I think that now, you know, people say we take them all seriously. Some of them are decidedly unserious, is how I view the second person we're going to talk about today. But the first person, Dave Chappelle, I think has earned the right in his career to always be sort of read with good intentions and with an expectation that he's going to say something which is worth listening to. So Dave is viewed in a complicated light these days. His most recent specials,
Look at the turmoil.
I like that. My heart is racing. Just like I'm like sweating.
Oh my gosh.
we've spoken about a couple of them, because I'm not sure whether it was 2 or 3 where he's so perceptive on other matters, and I know sort of Gel's got his views on how important it is and how clear-eyed he is when he's talking on issues of race, that when he went to speak about trans issues and it was really jarring to watch him get stuck on that, and you just saw every special after special after special of him struggling to understand the issues that people had with what he was saying. And now he's back, and he took to Saturday Night Live timely to talk about, well, his monologue.
Stuff.
To talk about stuff. The backdrop of it was Kanye and Kanye's thing with Jewish people, and the backdrop to that was Kyrie and his personal journey to enlightenment, which
Personal journey to self-destruction, it seems like at this stage.
bro, rooted in ignorance. So Kyrie Irving is a basketball player for the New York Nets.
Brooklyn Nets, mate.
For the Brooklyn Nets.
Brooklyn Nets. As a Knicks fan, I'm just trying to slowly co-opt the Nets as
The
my own
only good
team.
thing about the city.
Exactly. And he's famously, he considered himself as this enlightened fellow.
You've got to laugh.
He was a flat
He's in the
earther.
know.
Yeah.
He just knows more than we do.
Yeah, he was a flat earther. Well, not to say previously. He is a flat earther, just hasn't spoken about it for a while.
Moved on to other nonsense.
Yeah. During COVID, he was an anti-vaxxer, and to be honest, to his credit, he refused to go into the bubble to play the tournament because in protest of what was going on in America at the time, in the wake of George Floyd. And to be fair to him, his credentials around backing causes which he feels deserve them within the black community, he puts his money where his mouth is.
He walks it like he talks it, but he just talks a lot of shit.
Succinct.
Therein lies the issue.
Exactly. So most recently, Kyrie was on one, and he retweeted a link to a film which was just packed with anti-Semitic sort of tropes. I don't know if is he a black Israelite? I'm not sure, but
I'm not even opening that kind of
yeah. The film was called From Hebrews to Negroes. Anyway, as a result of that, Kyrie was suspended by his team, the Brooklyn Nets. A lot of people sort of agreed with that, but then some people disagreed with the way, following his suspension, he was made to adhere to a number of conditions in order to get his way back onto the team. Following on from that, Kanye racist rant, talking about how Jews were in control and they were stopping it from progressing. All the familiar sort of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic tropes that we're used to hearing about. Dave Chappelle enters center stage doing his monologue on Saturday Night Live, which should be said is run by Lorne Michaels, who is a Jewish gentleman. And in the monologue, he basically went on to, I guess, draw attention to the way that certain groups are viewed with particular stereotypes, and how those stereotypes are then sort of reflected back. And he talks about the difference between correlation and causation. Predictably, this caused a lot of division among society, and yeah, at first, I guess I want to talk about the fallout around that and our views on that. Alana, what was your response to hearing that Dave Chappelle monologue?
I saw the fallout before I actually watched what he said. So I guess I want to be like a tad careful here, just because I thought it was going to be a lot more offensive than I found it to be. Now, there were things that I found really annoying and problematic. And just for some context, my background, you guys are going to make fun of me because it's like one of the 50-11 things that I am. But genuinely, like, my whole dad's side of the family is Jewish. Parts of my mom's family is Jewish. Growing up,
You've got an alibi for anything that you could ever say.
I really do, yeah. Like, yeah. And obviously, I'm Black as well. So the main thing that that I found kind of annoying with Dave, which is also the thing that I found annoying when he was on his sort of like rants about trans people, was that there was just such a lack of nuance in the conversation. And it was somebody who, I really don't like this sort of us versus them thing that he's been doing recently. Like, oh, it's Black versus Jews, or it's Black people versus queer people. And it's like, okay, well, this, first of all, is inaccurate, but also erases so much nuance there, because obviously there are people who are both of these things. And furthermore, this is somebody... You can be all three. Yeah. I don't tick quite all of the boxes, but you never know, maybe. Yeah, I find that annoying. I find it takes away a lot of important conversation. I also think that it is relying on old stereotypes that I think are kind of tired in terms of trying to make comedy out of them. So for me, it was more like, this is Dave Chappelle. This is what he does. He takes tropes of different ethnicities and races. And so I wasn't particularly surprised. I wasn't strongly offended. But I see the problems with it, but he's been, he's Dave Chappelle. Like, he is problematic.
Jello?
So I think the same thing about Dave Chappelle in some ways that I think about the second topic, which is that as somebody that is in a minority myself, I think it's always important to listen to minorities on what they say, because just because it may not hit me as offensive, it doesn't matter. I'm not the person that's at the end of that. I think that it was in some ways better than some of the stuff that he did on trans issues, but as Alana said, it lacks nuance. The problem for Dave Chappelle is this: Dave Chappelle started doing comedy in a very binary era where things were one thing or another, and what he did was bring some nuance to it. So he was so far ahead of the game. If you look back to especially his second stand-up, for what it's worth, that iconic sketch, How Old Is 15 Really?, when he kind of pointed out how the black kid wanted the purple stuff, and talked about drink. There was a level of nuance which, for a world in which things were either one thing or another, was revolutionary, and obviously that kind of reaches its kind of apex with the Chappelle show, and a lot of the stuff that he did there, which was really pushing the envelope, is now pretty basic. So, you know, the racial draft back then revolutionary, now pretty basic. And I think the problem is that he was a person that was right on the edge pushing stuff, and actually because he was good, he then becomes mainstream. And then there are other people that are pushing the envelope. So we have a more nuanced understanding now of race. We have a more nuanced understanding of how class can intersect with race and wealth can intersect with race. And so Dave now finds himself in this position where he still can make jokes. He's still funny. He still understands the nuts and bolts of comedy, but he's not on the cutting edge like he used to be. And then the other thing, of course, is that people will clap back now. We do have social media, and people will go, "That's nonsense," and they can be heard. Because let's be honest, the large parts of that were funny, and it's, you know, the part that he did directly after talking about Kyrie was about Herschel Walker
That bit killed me.
in
I'm not
Georgia.
gonna lie. That was so funny.
But that was a black guy talking
Yeah,
about a black guy.
Exactly.
And I actually don't think some of the joke. There was one joke he made in particular, which he could only make because he is black. You could not allude, and I haven't seen many comedians, white comedians, allude to the fact that Herschel Walker is identifiably stupid. He's that guy has spent his working career and slapped upside the head by guys that were like 24, 25 stone. He left some of his brain out there on the pitch.
See you talking about the vampire movie the other night. Please tell me you've seen that clip.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in right there.
But my point is that didn't hit my ears as racist. But if Jon Stewart had made those jokes, there might have been an issue. But I don't think Jon Stewart would make those jokes. Dave Chappelle, when he's talking about the nuances of anti-black racism, is still, I honestly think he should go down as one of the great thinkers about anti-black racism. And I would literally put him up there with like Ta-Nehisi Coates. The problem is the second he steps away from his field of research, it sounds like a scientist trying to educate somebody on Shakespeare. And you can be really, really smart about something, but that doesn't give you that general overview. You have to continue to do the work. And I just don't know that he has. And instead, he seems to, because what did he end it on? Kind of cancel culture. My guy, you got paid 60 million and counting from Netflix. You've just gone on to Lorne Michaels' show. You're not being cancelled. But yeah, it's hard to talk about things, but that's because we should take care to listen to what people say and take care to hear how people are being hurt. That's my views.
Do you think this is not me pushing back? This is just me thinking out loud. The part that you talked about, if you speak about a bunch of black people, or there's black people doing something, it's a gang. If it's Italian people, it's a mob, and if it's Jewish people, it's a coincidence. Do you think some of that might be born out of frustration in terms of the way that black people get branded when they do something that's not necessarily positive?
I mean, it's a beautiful joke, right? It's a beautiful setup, because if you only take, me and Dan were talking about this, there's the clip from Dan Labertard. If you only take issue with the last bit, you kind of passively accept that it's okay to call Italians mobs and black people gangs, which is just as, not just, I don't want to say it's just as problematic, but it is problematic to kind of label, see us four walking down the street and go gang. That's ridiculous. The problem is that at the end of certain stereotypes is violence. For black people, the idea that we are gang members, and in America, you know, you're packing heat or whatever, you know, you can get killed because a cop is scared when he pulls you over. You know, with Jewish people, at the end of those conspiracies is marches with tiki torches saying Jews will not replace us. Is the fact that anti-Semitic hate crimes are at like the highest levels since the Second World War. Like, there is real victims of that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't joke about anything, but like kind of consider the intended and unintended consequences of that. And yeah, Dave can be frustrated about it, but like he kind of made this joke about, you know, I've been to Hollywood, there's a lot of Jews. Do you know what there's more of in Hollywood? Christians. There are significantly more Christians in Hollywood. But people don't kind of go, oh, there's a lot of Christian people making stuff. I wonder how that affects the art that we see coming out of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because Jews are a kind of, it's easy to point at Jews because they are a minority, and you go, well, I can see a Jew here, I can see a Jew there. But actually, if Dave wanted to really turn his sights to something, he would turn it to Christians. But of course, people don't do that.
To be fair, that was in reference to the topic at hand, I guess, which is why he said that. The topic at hand was what's been going on with Kanye and the backdrop of Kyrie as well, which is why he said that rather than it's not like a special where he's picked that as a topic. That's just what he talks about, current things, right?
It wouldn't surprise me if that's next, though, because he seems to have this thing, and I'm again speaking as someone. It's no secret to anyone that listens to or is in this podcast. Like, everyone knows what I think of Dave Chappelle and the impact he's had on me in my consumption of his work. But what I'm getting tired of now, what I am tired of now, is the fact that he seems to do this thing where, like we've talked about it before, like the disadvantaged Olympics. Like, yes, black people have had it terribly and do have it terribly. Other people do as well. And we can all help each other. We can all kind of be a shoulder for others to cry on that are in a similar situation. It doesn't have to be our turn, then your turn, then your turn. And I wouldn't be surprised if off the back of the monologue that he did on SNL and the backlash that he's had from it, if that does take up a huge part of his next special. I think the only thing that might potentially prevent that from being the case is that so many of his contemporaries and seemingly close friends of his, look at Jon Stewart, are Jewish people as well. Because as much as he talks about Daphne being a good friend of his, how many trans friends does Dave Chappelle really have?
Yeah, and that was the thing too, is like you have people within show business in Hollywood, which they were specifically talking about, who are Jewish and they're comedians, and some people who are kind of like, this is hilarious. And then of course you have the other side where there were people who were like, I don't find this funny at all. I think there's anti-Semitism throughout this whole thing. So I think that's probably where some of that conflict is, with people don't really know how to feel about it, and why this is kind of a tricky one to dissect, because again, like I said, was I personally offended by what he said? Not really. And I think, and it's also interesting for me because growing up in such close proximity to Hollywood and having actually loads of Jewish friends, it was like, even within my Jewish community, these were sort of stereotypes that were joked about as well, like how black people will joke about things within black culture and Jewish people joke about things in Jewish culture. But there's nothing malicious there, and the joke is the fact that it's so absurd. Like, there might be some truth to it, but ultimately it's absurd and it's exaggerated. The problem, which I think Angela was also pointing out, is when some of the people that are an audience to those jokes they're not finding it absurd. They're taking it more as a truth.
It's when the laugh sounds different, when the wrong people are laughing to it.
Which is why it's surprising that Dave should know that more than anyone.
And this keeps coming up.
Yeah.
What he preached about, he keeps doing that exact same thing, or at least making his audience do that. And that's not fair. It's hypocritical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think his argument would be, though, and like what he's saying or not, it seems to be true. He's turned his sights on seemingly everyone at this point, which is the strange thing about it. And I guess what he seemed to be taking issue with was I guess the standards applied to the centre of that behaviour when it's a black man. And I've seen a few people talked about this. Shannon Sharp's talked about this, particularly in Kyrie's case. There's been 2 people ever indefinitely suspended from the NBA for their actions, and it's Ime Udoka and Kyrie Irving. And all the time that the NBA has been around, that anyone's done anything. And I think he sort of takes issue with this view that they'll be treated differently. So I think I feel like that's one of the reasons he tries to take up for it, and it becomes this contest where we have to go through this again compared to other people. when that shouldn't be the case.
But multiple things can be
You know
right
why
at the
that's so
same time,
particularly
though.
ridiculous?
Go
But
ahead,
also, if we do want to do an oppression Olympics, there's only one gold medal winner, and that's the Gypsy Roman traveller community, because they don't even get to be heard in these conversations. Like, their way of life has literally been made illegal. You can still put them at the butt of your jokes. Like, say something bad about black people now and see how long it's going to take for you to start losing things. It's gonna happen. Say something bad about the Jewish community. It's going to happen. The Gypsy Roman traveller community, it didn't even get debated in Parliament when they passed through the law that essentially made their way of living illegal in this country. And that happened not 50 years, not 20 years, but less than 2 years ago. So it's a stupid game to play, full stop. It's a particularly stupid game to play because the fact that there are prominent black people and prominent Jewish people means that this topic will get aired. And I just get so frustrated because actually it is the Gypsy Roma traveller community in this country that is the most stood on. You can still make jokes at their expense in normal society and there is no consequence to it. And that is very frustrating for me.
Yeah. I don't think, though, that makes it... we shouldn't play the game, but we should definitely talk about it. There's not a conversation about that. And it's going to emerge more with the sort of second topic we talk about in David Baddiel, and the view that, you know, in his perception, Jewish voices, Jews don't count. He had a book, he's got a documentary, I'm sure a film's going to follow, but he's been criticised for that. You know, that very viewpoint is pretty much rendered a bit ridiculous by his own actions, and you know, we'll get into that later on. But as you say, there are other communities which truly have been made invisible just by sort of modern living. So we you know, it is an episode of two comedians. Our second comedian, loosely term it, is David Baddiel, made famous during the 90s for his TV show with Frank Skinner, fantasy football, 3 lines on a shirt, all that stuff. Interviews, sketches, the most infamous one being the one involving Nottingham Forest footballer Jason Lee, during which David Baddiel blacked up, put a pineapple on his head, and played a role pretty much every episode for maybe a season and a half of this incompetent, ignorant, stupid, slow, untalented black man on BBC Two every week without any kind of shame. And this is something which people have understandably taken issue with through this man's career, as he sort of segued from being a comedian into becoming the sort of most prominent voice on anti-Jewish racism, on anti-semitism. He wrote a book called Jews Don't Count. That book has been made into a documentary called Jews Don't Count 25 years later, at which point he understood he had to finally address the Jason Lee sort of stench that had been following his career around in the sort of Twitter comments, and he acknowledged he had to apologise for this thing to have any kind of credibility.
Yeah.
I think there are a few different things at play here. At this point, I'm going to give the floor over to you, Angelo.
So, for context, for the listeners, new ones, old ones, I'm the oldest member of this group by a number of years. And when that show came out, it was at the time that I was going from primary school to secondary school. Whilst those of you that have seen me know that I now have my hair in twists, I actually, from about the age of 15 until the time that I left full-time teaching, cut my hair off. And the second I left, the first thing I did was grow it back. When I went to secondary school, that show was in its pomp. And let us not forget, it was one of the biggest shows in the country. Let us not forget that David Baddiel was one of the biggest personalities in this country. He is still making bank off the song that he and Frank Skinner and the Lightning Seeds wrote, Three Lions on a Shirt. So this is not some little old me. This is not some small comedian. Like, his impact was absolutely huge. This show is called Black in a Box. Our tagline is "The world is told by black faces in white spaces." I grew up in a white community. The one thing I had that made me so proud was my hair, because my hair was in twists. It was a thing that kind of, I knew something of the history of it, of protective hairstyles, of how it went back to kind of Western Africa. I went from primary school to secondary school. I was so proud of my hair. And going to secondary school, I used to have "He's Got a Pineapple" stuck on his head, chanted. I used to be mocked as a Jason Lee type and slow and ungainly, even though I wasn't. I was a talented sportsman. The shit that he did rippled. It took him 25 years to apologize. And I'll be honest, I'm confused. I'm confused because, you see me, I'm a minority. If somebody says that thing that you did is disrespectful to my people, I don't have to reach far to go, how would I feel if that happened to me? He has for a long time spoken about the Jewish issue that he sees in this country. To be clear, I think that he has every right to talk about the Jewish issues in this country and in the world. I do think that there is a significant proportion of people that believe that Jews run the world and believe in all of these anti-Semitic tropes. And to be clear, I do think that is racist. The difference is, if you say something you cannot build your career, I don't believe, off of being anti-Semitic in the way that so many people literally built their career off anti-black racism. He's asked in the Jason Lee podcast why it's taken him so long, and he said a lot of things, and I listened. And one of the things he said was, by the time I was kind of made aware of it, it was taking off. And then he kind of segs away. But it was clear, I was making bank off of doing it. So it made it very difficult for me to apologize. And don't forget, he's not the only one. He talks about how Avid Marion did that horrendously
Lee Francis.
racist depiction. Lee Francis, yes, playing the character Avid Marion, did that horrendously racist depiction of him. It did not ruin his career. It ruined Craig David's career. It absolutely ruined Craig David's career. He has spoken about it. I would argue Ali G did exactly the same thing. He played on this caricature of blackness. Matt Lucas and David Walliams. Yeah. The anti-black racism is the point. They have built their career specifically off of that. That's the point. And 12-year-old me suffered from the impact of that. Now, there are those that will go, oh, you shouldn't, your story is a story, but it's not data. We can go and look into the data of anti-black racism. We can look at who's at the bottom of league tables for education. We can look at the discrimination. We can look at the number of black people in prison. I'm not saying, of course, that David Baddiel is responsible for all of that, or any of that, in fact. I'm saying that is one of the most prominent comedians in the country to do a sketch that specifically was anti-black racist, and to realize in about 2004, when the joke about him came online, and for it to then take another 18 years, means that I just don't think, whilst he absolutely can talk about anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish racism, he cannot speak in any nuanced way, because if it takes me 18 years, if it takes any person 18 years, when everybody in that group that you have offended is saying that's offensive, for you to do an in-person apology, for me, that's invalidating.
Well, I think on top of that as well is, you said 18 years. My man was in his 30s when he did that.
32.
He was 32 years old when he blacked up. Right, if you're telling me that a 32-year-old can't recognise what is wrong with what he's doing at the age of 32, then I'm going to find any apology that comes afterwards disingenuous. Because like, you knew that it was bad when you did it then, but how many times have we all made a laugh at somebody else's, made a joke at somebody else's expense because we know we're going to get a cheap laugh? We've all done it. if you're going to get a cheap laugh and notoriety and this level of fame that he ended up with, then you're not going to stop it. But don't act like you weren't aware that it was a bad thing when you were doing it, or that you've grown as a person to get to this point to apologise. It's bullshit. I'm not buying that one bit.
Frank Skinner had at least had the shame to say he was ashamed of himself at the time online. Probably hasn't said it in person to Jason Lee, but at least he had the shame to say it. And just the things David Baddiel's saying, just they don't stack up. They don't stack up
at all
as the actions of someone who was going through some sort of moral metamorphosis as a human being. He said, stuff happened to me in the podcast. Stuff happened to me after that, which made me realise how you must have felt. And that must have been when he was 40 years old. Why was it like at this great awakening? Now, the incident in which he cites as a turning point for himself was, obviously, there was the incident, as you say, with Lee Francis. The sketch with Lee Francis. And then after that, I think he said he'd gone to Stamford Bridge with his brother around sort of the late 2010. 2008. And him and his brother Ivor confronted a guy who said, "Fuck off, Jew," during a Spurs fixture. Now, I find it incredible if you watch this podcast. It's quite a difficult watch because Jason Lee, incredibly dignified man, and he holds him fully accountable, just not let him wriggle off the hook. But it's incredible to me, like, to watch this man who's got the front to draw this kind of kindred victimhood. When he says that, it's like, oh well, I found it incredible that we have this shared experience of having our ethnic background both used against us. And I was like, yeah, by you. By you. And there's just that missing piece of ownership of his own behaviour. It's like he's had this out of body experience in the late sort of 1990s, and now he's this different man.
And also, it's not accurate to say that they're having the same experience, because you have one person who has experienced racism and has been made the butt of this joke when he's a young guy and he's trying to be a successful footballer, is successful, and his career, and I think it's Jason Lee, he says that most successful period of his life was completely overshadowed by this sort of being made into a farce. And that is something that he'll never get back. Like, that time is gone. Like, you want to talk about reparations or like corrective action, or that he'll never get those years back. And while he says he's very proud of it and he looks back on those years fondly, that is a big
about his mum as well. That was really
chunk. And to see your parents seeing how you're being ridiculed, the fact that he had to explain to his young kids why people were yelling at him in the streets. I mean, that is, you can't undo those actions. So no matter what Baddiel has experienced in his middle ages, it's never going to, it pales in comparison to what his actions have done to this person.
It's so frustrating that he's managed to be elevated to this point without anyone really pulling his coat. This is the first time he's faced any kind of pushback on what he's done, because this is the conversation now. His message is absolutely timely, and it couldn't have come at a better time.
No.
But unfortunately, he is not the champion for that message.
That's what annoyed me so much, because I was watching the documentary, and the whole time I was watching it, I mean, there were several points in it that I thought were lacking a certain level of nuance, which we've come to expect from these conversations now. I think the part where he was speaking to his niece, and she was pointing out that there is a certain protection that a lot of Jewish people are afforded, and that a lot of them can pass for being a white man or a white woman, versus her, who is mixed, half black, half Jewish. And she says it herself, if her black parent was to get stopped by the police, she would feel very differently versus if her white parent was to be stopped by the police.
100%.
That
I relate
level
to
of
that.
nuance, 100%, that is there. that was, I think, kind of either overlooked in the analysis that he did for the documentary or was intentionally left out, I think, because he didn't look very receptive of that when she spoke to it. And that's her speaking to her experience as well. But the reason this annoys me so much is that if they had somebody who didn't have such a checkered past that was leading this documentary, it's an incredibly powerful piece of TV.
Yeah.
Because so many people don't know what they don't know.
I mean, Jason,
I'll be completely honest. I have got several Jewish friends. One of my best friends that I was at uni with lived with him for how many years? So we've had conversations about anti-Semitism. I've done a lot of learning through my conversations with him, but I didn't realise the full extent to which this goes on. I didn't. I learned a lot from this documentary. But the fact now that we've got this person who was leading it, when there was an opportunity for so many people to learn and just learn rather than start to point fingers and question this person's background, and there's a much broader conversation that's happening around it, it's such a wasted opportunity. If you actually do want to action change, if you want to make something better in the world, then all of the pieces need to come together and actually work for it. You can't just say, okay, he wrote this book, it was a good book, this is the right person to do it. No, it's bullshit. Miriam Margolyes would have been better doing it, honestly.
It's pernicious to avoid his past just because he's a name that you used to have around.
Exactly.
the way he even went about the apology was really weird to me. You're on somebody else's podcast and you come in and set the terms. I found that very.
Yeah.
It didn't sit right with me.
Jason Lee was interviewed by Will Unwin in The Guardian, and he said the guy just came up and he just basically gobbled out this apology straight away. It's like it showed a weakness, and it showed a lack of sort of strength and confidence in what he was saying. And that's exactly what it felt to me. It's like I'm just gonna get this out. I'm just gonna get this out, and it's gonna be done. Like he's a writer, so he's good with words, but you can always tell, I feel, when someone's insincere with whether they're good with words or not.
But
Do you know?
also, the fact
Sorry.
that he kind of said that he apologized over so many years. It's like it's not an apology. Look, if I beat the hell out of you and then I announce to everybody, I apologize, like how flipping Michael Scott says, I declare bankruptcy. Like, I haven't apologized to you. Like, the fact that he's taken him so long to apologize in person tells you a lot about the man. Sorry, Don.
No, I had a different office quote in mind, and that's the direction I was going. The episode where Dwight shoots a gun in the office and he's been told to apologise, and he comes and he reads his statement of regret, which just says, I state my regret. That's what I was getting from this. It's like, right, look, I know for this documentary to have be held up as any kind of think piece on anti-Semitism, to have any kind of backbone, I need to go and do this. So I'm just going to do it. I'm going to get it out there so I can say I've done it. And that's what it felt like. It was like you are just stating your regret because you need to keep your bag.
And the other thing, I think a true apology it's not passive. It is an active thing. You need to take corrective action if you actually want to have a sincere apology. And I just mean, it's to say, I've done something harmful. I understand why it was harmful. I'm sorry that I've done that harm. And then here is how I'm going to correct it and avoid doing this again in the future. And
You've been
I
talking
think...
to Emma. It's my script.
I do have it written down because I was like, "Ooh, this is fire! I'm gonna say it." But it is true. Like that is a sincere apology, and I think he was talking about doing those things, but then there was a point in the podcast with Jason where they were talking about being allies and allyship, and they were talking about supporting women's football just as equally as men's football. And, Baddiel was like, oh, yeah, me too. I also support that. But then Jason was like, when was the last time you were at a women's match? Like, when did you actually take some action against what you're saying here? And he was like, well, yeah, maybe to be fair, I actually need to go, but I tweet about it. And it's just like, it's so contradictory. Like, it's just bullshit.
Performatism.
The last two things that I'll say, the first one I'll say is that I'll bring it back to my experience. Those kids that mocked me and sang those songs became the middle-aged men that birthed the youngsters that were writing racist stuff to our black footballers when they missed penalties in the last Euros. That's the ripple effect. That's what not kind of apologizing in person and doing the restorative work does. And the similarity between David Baddiel and Dave Chappelle, I think, is that clearly David Baddiel is able to speak with some nuance about the different ways in which anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, and he is very ignorant of other forms of racism. Dave Chappelle is able to speak in very nuanced ways about the impact of anti-black racism, and he is not to the same degree but similarly ignorant about other forms. And the problem is that, as you said, Dom, we end up with Oppression Olympics where everybody is losing.
I agree. I just as well, before we move on to whatever we go on to next, I actually want to say, if you can try and divorce yourself from the fact that you're watching David Baddiel present this documentary, please watch it. And the reason I say this is because if I speak from my own personal experience and then go back to 2020 as well, the amount of people who are progressive, and David Baddiel speaks so much about progressives in the documentary, who came to me and said, I had no idea. I think it made it a lot easier to grasp when it was 2020 and George Floyd was murdered, because you could see it. You could see effects with that. A man was murdered in cold blood because of the colour of his skin. And because of that, I think black, brown, Asian, whatever, if you are visibly different to other people, it's easier to understand violence that occurs against them. I think so many of us, myself definitely included in this, when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to anti-Jewish hate crimes, because so many Jewish people do not necessarily look like the horrible, disgusting stereotypes that people post about Jewish people, it's easy to forget just how bad things are for them as well. We look at the Holocaust and it's kind of like, and then everything was good. That's not the case. And I think because of the fact that we are in a place of learning now where people are typically more open to understanding other people's situations and the things that they go through, do watch it. I learned some great things. I learned some uncomfortable things. You just have to try and get away from the fact that it's somebody that shouldn't be presenting this documentary who is presenting it. That's what I try and say to people.
I agree. And I think just if you can, give the Jason Lee Absolutely podcast a listen as well. As I say, it's not the easiest watch, but it's essential, and it showed, like, as I said before, the dignity of that man and the sort of strength of character to give someone more grace than he deserves, in my case. Because, I mean, I don't always forgive. I don't always forget. But to his credit, he's been able to sort of move on with that and create a dialogue which is positive for everyone involved. What's going on out in the desert, Angelo?
Really simply, no, so what happened for our listeners is I've made a decision that I'm not watching the World Cup. I'm painfully unbothered by it for a number of reasons. One, I've been well served by global tournaments this year. I got to watch the Men's Rugby League World Cup. I got to watch the Women's Rugby League World Cup. I got to watch the Women's Euros. I got to watch the Women's Rugby Union World Cup. I got to watch the Disabled Rugby League World Cup. I've been well served by global tournaments. Yeah, gunshot for the rugby league. The promo and the marketing on that was A1. DC.
Can we get a sound? Can we get a sound ball?
Sport, especially international sport, is about escapism. I cannot escape what is going on in. I cannot escape what is going on in Qatar with regards to their treatment of queer communities, with regards to their treatment of migrant workers, with regards to all of the issues that are there. This is not me saying that those issues do not exist in this country. We've got 3.5 years of podcast that talks about the fuckeries that go on in this country, but it's meant to be escapism. It's not helping me escape. But more than that, if I can keep it really, really real, I remember what happened with the Euros, and I'm just not investing in a tournament where the first game for England, five of the goals were scored by black players. We know if they hit a crossbar or they get a 6 out of 10 in a game where England get knocked out, We know what's going to happen on Twitter. Do not try and tell me that football brings people together when if it's conditional upon them being world champions. I'm just not for it. But how are you guys enjoying it?
That ain't what football's for. The football's isn't to bring people together. That's not what football's for. Football is bipartisan. Just go and have a shout. Go and be happy. Go and be angry. Go and get all of those emotions out. And when I was watching on Monday, I felt like a proud big brother. It made me happy to see Bukayo up there doing his thing on the world stage. And those are little things. I can't remove myself from that. Try as I may, I can very much be against what's happening in Qatar. I can be very, very, very much against FIFA, this non-profit organisation in which every single person seems to be a millionaire. But at the same time, I can't get away from the fact that when I see Bukayo smiling from ear to ear, when I see the same with Marcus Rashford, when I see all of them doing the thing on the world stage, I feel something that I don't want people to take away from me. So I'm in. I wasn't intending to be this much in, but I'm in. I was watching Morocco this morning. Like, no shade to Morocco, but I shouldn't be watching Morocco at 10 o'clock. But I'm in now. I'm in.
I find this conversation really interesting because, well, kind of exactly what you said. Like, I was having a conversation where I am like you, Angelo. I will not be watching the World Cup or supporting the World Cup. And actually, I made this decision after, learning about the civil rights atrocities happening over there, but then also like the modern slavery and that, and I just don't want to support it. But I actually was learning about the 1984 Olympics in LA and what was happening. Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into it, but it had me reflecting on the 2028 Olympics that's happening in the UK. The fact that it's going to lose money, that how it's affecting communities, and especially Black and brown communities. The fact that we were basically policed during that time. And so I'm just looking at these things like the World Cup, like the Euros, where it's like, do I really need to support these things? And so I was talking to Nick about this, and he was like, yes, but you not watching is not going to make a big difference to it's not going to make a difference. And I'm sorry that maybe I'm throwing him under the bus. And my whole argument is like, yes, me not watching is not going to make a difference, but I can't sit here and say, I'm against this, I'm against this, I'm against that, but I'm still going to watch it. Because ultimately, that is how I'm contributing my dollars. That's how this thing like, if everybody's like, yes, we condemn this, but we're still going to watch it, we're still going to play, we're still going to buy tickets, we're still going to go. Okay, so literally there's like nothing is different
like
here.
We're also selective with this though, because I
No,
agree.
no,
I agree because we can be massively against Qatar, which everyone on this podcast is 100% fair. But the real culprits here is FIFA. It's always going to be FIFA. Always going to be FIFA. And then the amount of corporations that we uphold that are doing horrific things as well, but we still buy the products because it comes tomorrow. We still do all this. I hate so much. Sorry, Alana, about the USA. But still, I enjoy all their music. I enjoy all their sports. I enjoy all their entertainments, and I still buy into it. And I always say to myself, and this is very apt as well because we were just talking about anti-Semitism. I have often said I don't think I'd feel comfortable going to Israel for certain various different reasons. But then at the same time, I was in the USA a couple of weeks ago. Would I go to Russia?
And I just got back from Israel, so don't be...
This is the thing. This is the thing.
Yeah,
There's so much. We're so selective with our outrage. So it feels to me like so much of it is. And I'm not going to say anybody is doing this, but I feel like there are certain elements of virtue signaling with it. I'm not saying that's everyone at all, but
I
that's
agree.
how it comes across.
Can I just say something really quickly? The only thing that I'll say is, yes, I do think people can be selective, but my point was like, for me, the LA Olympics, for instance, was something that I was really looking forward to. I was like, I'm going to be there. It's in LA. I'm going. And it sucks that I'm going to have to kind of be like, I don't know if I'm actually really comfortable in supporting this thing that disenfranchises so many people.
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
I've changed. And the last World Cup, I was so thrilled, and it was such an amazing energy. And yes, I want to support those players, and I don't think it should be on them.
That was in Russia, though. That was in Russia.
I know, but
This is
I've
the
learned.
thing.
I've learned more, and that's what I'm saying. Is that I've learned more. I'm trying to do differently.
Fuck FIFA.
There are a few. There are a few layers to that. One, we are humans, so of course people are going to be selective. Of course, people are going to be hypocritical. I'm sorry, but there's nothing to me worse than the idea that unless you do everything, you cannot do that. Then you
I
can't.
agree.
No, you're
I
not.
agree.
It's exactly the opposite of what you're saying, because you're saying
No, it's not. I'm saying
Yeah.
that there does seem to be a level that isn't particularly honest by people. But I live by the same morals. I'm obviously the certain things I just said it with Israel versus the US versus Russia. So I'm saying that I'm flawed in that exact same way, and that's how I feel the World Cup is being covered as well.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I with the travel thing, I draw a line. I think at going to places where they're bombing people in that exact place at that time that I'm there. I can't be going eating out in dinner when there's shells literally flying through the sky to people. And yeah, maybe that is selective, but that's just where I've drawn my line. And I think people are like that. People are going to have blind spots or prejudices or whatever. I think we've given into capitalism. That's what you're saying here. Ultimately, we've given into capitalism because, like, Infantino basically said, "You can't do shit. You cannot do anything. So you are going to hold this World Cup because you are all hypocrites."
Sepp Blatter would have been proud of Infantino early this week.
Exactly. He's like, "You are going to hold this. You are booze ban, not in the boxes." Have you not got box money? Because if you've got box money, you can drink all the Budweiser you want. Not just Budweiser. We've got spirits up in there. They're yakking in the boxes. But if you haven't got box money, you better get yourself outside that zone, over to the Fire Festival, and watch a game on a screen. That's it.
Stroke a lion.
We're simply giving in to capitalism. That is, it's a sorry fact of it. With regards to watching the thing, I construct my own rules. It's like the year when I said I'm not going to buy anything for an entire year. I said, except if I get gifted something, or if it's a birthday or something. You can stretch those two however you want. So
you can always set your own rules.
Exactly. So it's like I'm not watching any yet. So I've literally watched. They did a watch party at work for the England game because my colleagues hosted it. So I stood and watched it, and I was being paid to do that. And I've not watched any games today where I was at home.
I'll pull up some tweets
just because I was busy. That was from the watch party with my Budweiser beer and my crisps and my pizza. Think about the sponsors, Dom. So there you go. But it's one of those. Yeah, everyone makes their own rules. I'm not currently excited by it. Like everyone, the WhatsApp's popping. Everyone's like, "It's the best World Cup ever." We've had 2 massive shocks. England are beating someone 6, whatever. France were whooping someone yesterday. I will undoubtedly at some point get carried away, but I don't know. In the WhatsApp group's been really interesting because everyone was like, "Oh, this is a terrible World Cup," and then it's quickly by day 3 when the BBC spoke about put a piece on about it being this carbon zero World Cup. It's just a little investigation into it not being it, and they were like, "Oh, for God's sake, they're talking about this again. We get it. They're gonna give it up." And I was like, "Bro, it's 3 days in." It's the 3rd time they've spread something which is not positive. You've had 120 minutes of them talking about the game. I think it's only fair that they highlight these issues. So I know I hope that the BBC carry on their personal beef with the organisers. Be interesting to see if it continues or not. But yeah, I think the World Cup has really sort of revealed that ultimately the show is going to go on, where capitalism reigns, and they know how to get to us: bread circuses and endless injury time.
That is great, but let's not hide away from the fact as well that football is more of a religion than religion to a lot of people in this country, right? No. This is important. This is important because all the stuff about capitalism is real and it's true and it is factual, right? It is. But then at the same time, there is a huge number of people, myself included, that have all of those views and opinions and are completely singing from that same hymn sheet, but also fucking love football. And I want to watch because that is, again, escapism for me. Like, if I get to watch my team playing for 120 minutes now, apparently, it's great. I love that because there's so many highs and lows I feel in that time. A lot of the time, that's how certain people feel most alive. And it's difficult, I think, to expect people to shy away from that when it is something that is so important to their overall life.
I think just what I understand that. I think for me, my argument is just you can disagree with what's happening in this World Cup, and you could be a huge football, a diehard. But just understand that you are giving your viewership, you're giving some dollars to this thing that you are highly criticizing.
You can't ignore
so don't tell me like. I just think that
I just love football.
I just want there to be an acknowledgement, because what I don't like is the like, yeah, but I'm super against it. I'm like, that's fine. You can be morally against it, but you're still giving them the thing that they want, which is why they're hosting this.
But they've already got it.
They do, of course. And that's what like one person, sure, that's not going to, but I've just seen a lot of things where people are offering a lot of criticism, but then they're not changing their behaviors. So I'm like, yes, you could still highlight these things, but also just know that unless you're going to change your behaviors, like we were talking about, like, that corrective action, if you're not going to like actually sacrifice something of yourself to like stand in what you're saying, you're still ultimately contributing to this thing.
I've already done my bit of sacrifice. I was actually offered several tickets gratis because I've got a few friends in high places and whatnot. I chose not to go. I chose not to go. I was like, I don't want to go contribute to this fuckery with my own money.
I don't know if you guys can hear this on the mic, but this is the world's tiniest violin for Dom.
Oh no, I'm not looking for any kind of sympathy whatsoever. I didn't want to go. I absolutely did not want to go because up until probably about 3 minutes to 1 on Monday, I didn't give two fucks about this World Cup. And then I saw my little black boys lining up. I was like, oh shit, I'm in now. I'm in now.
That is great.
It's and I'm glad you raised that about the corrective behaviour. This nonsense with the armbands.
Oh my god.
that has angered me beyond belief. Like, why make a big deal over it?
Wait, what is this? Can you check? Because I am not tuned into this at
basically, the plan was for a bunch of different teams, England, Germany, a few others, maybe France, to wear this One Love armband with a rainbow on it.
Rainbow, yeah, okay.
And they were like, can we wear it? Can we not? Can we wear it? Can we not? And FIFA were like, no, you can't. You might get it. And there was this threat that they were going to potentially get a yellow card for making a statement for wearing this armband, like, straight away. That has always been a rule. That's been in the rule book. So it's not a new thing. They were just threatening to enforce it. And the FA cowardly back down because they're like, well, we want to make a statement, but we don't want to put our players in a situation where they face a sporting penalty. Heaven forbid someone playing football in this tournament gets a yellow card. There are so many ways you can make that point. Give the armband to Pickford. Let your goalkeeper take, and let's see it. Let everyone in the world see him take that yellow 1 minute in, and then give someone else the armband. Have them yellow card every single player, and we'll see that. How far are you willing to go with this?
Yeah.
Because it was the most. If you are not prepared to accept the sanction that comes with it, don't make the point in the first place that you're fighting for these people's rights, because you're not really an ally. If it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah. I can't believe that. Well, I could believe it.
And I mean, God bless Alex Scott for wearing it. But what are you wearing it for? You're not risking anything.
You see Infantino today?
Oh my goodness!
Up in the box, I think it was the German-Japan game.
Yeah.
Sat with someone from the German sporting hierarchy who was wearing the armband whilst the German players covered their mouths instead of wearing the armband. It's just all fucking stupid.
What a powerful statement! I mean, with the bet, what?
It's a bigger statement to wear the armband and get booked. If you want to make a statement, do it.
That is my point.
This has been another Black in the Box comedy meets
tragedy.
Thank you.
What do you think of the new surroundings before we wrap up?
Salubrious.
It's real brick.
That's real brick.
It's real brick. I thought it might have been
after I
linoleum,
knocked on it, I found out.
Yeah, I like the individual chairs. Ali sorted the posture out. I've got my own mic.
I've been like, is it Get Him to the Greek where my man can't get comfortable on the seat because he's very, very
No,
high. I've been in
no.
about 15 different.
When he's just like,
It's be cool.
this isn't right.
It's be cool when no one can sit in the
That's
chair.
it, yeah.
No one can sit in a little corner chair, and everyone spends a whole film
It's just wrong.
trying to put their
Well, this
legs.
is the thing. I'm not used to this seat, so I've been in about 27 different positions, but wonderful. I like the little fake plant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hold tight, the engineer out here,
He's doing his stuff.
loving it. Jello,
Yo. Stay well, people.
stay well, my brother.
Get rid of that fucking mustache.
Leave me alone.
Thank you for watching. We out.